I actually feel like the previous story is a good segue into my story. Yes, I wrote a novel, and actually, there's a scene in my novel of Women in Salt in which one of the young protagonists, Jeanette, is a teenager, and she's walking along the beach in Miami after a night of clubbing, and she comes upon a body that has washed ashore. And what most people don't know about this scene is that it's actually based on something that happened in my real life. So when I was a senior in high school in Miami, I got a call at like 3 a.m. from my sister, who was a freshman at the time in high school. I knew that she had told my mom that she was sleeping over her friend's house, but that in reality, she had decided to go clubbing in South Beach with a bunch of her friends. They had fake IDs. And in the 90s and 2000s, this was something that we did a lot. There was a huge club scene and like phone parties, and it was really easy to get in as like a teenager. It's very different now, obviously. But that was something that we did all the time. Anyways, I assumed my sister was just like super drunk, maybe like drunk calling me or something, you know? But it was still weird that she was calling me at like 3 a.m. So even though I was super asleep and half out of it, I decided to pick up. And immediately I knew something was wrong. You know, she was like hysterical and sobbing, and I could barely understand what she was saying. So, you know, I told her to take a breath, calm down, you know, and tell me what was going on. So finally, you know, she was able to kind of get it together, and she told me the story, which was that she had been clubbing with 3 of her friends. They'd been at a club. And then they had decided, it was like a few blocks away from South Beach, and they had decided that they were going to walk along the shore and try to like sober up a little bit before they called for their ride, who was going to take them to her friend's house. Her friend had like a cool mom who didn't care if they came home at like 3 a.m. So, you know, they were walking along the beach, and it was nighttime, so it was very dark. And then my sister stumbled on what she thought was a rock, which was weird because, you know, Miami Beach, there aren't really many rocks. So they sort of got closer to see what it was they had stumbled on. And she saw a face and realized that it was a dead body of a woman. So obviously they all freaked out, you know, they started screaming. They just, you know, ran from the body to another part of the beach. And then they had pondered like what to do. So my sister had suggested they call 911 to report the body that had washed ashore. And her friends thought it was a bad idea, which at the time I thought they were overreacting, but then everything I know now about police and police encounters, like perhaps they weren't wrong, you know? But her friends were basically afraid that the police would show up and that they would actually get in trouble because they were minors, they had been drinking, they had fake IDs on them. So they were afraid that they would get in trouble, that their parents would find out that they weren't actually at a sleepover. You know, like most teenagers, they were just really worried about themselves. But they were also worried that if they didn't alert anyone, you know, they were sort of paranoid that, you know, they were like, our footprints from the sand are leading from this body, and we're afraid they would somehow be implicated or connected to this body. So my sister was just like freaking out and basically begged me to like sneak out of my house and go drive to where she was and like help her figure out what to do, you know? And as a 17-year-old myself, like I was very unaccustomed to anyone looking to me to figure out what to do about anything. But, you know, she never asked me for anything, and I decided to go. So I grabbed my mom's keys, I snuck out the window, and drove to South Beach, which was like 30 minutes away from my house. And then when I got there, I found my sister, and she and her friends were sort of sitting on a bench by the beach, and they were all in their like glittery sequin dresses and high heels, but looked very much like terrified, scared children, and my sister asked me if I wanted to see the body. She offered to take me to where it was and show it to me, almost as if I would know what to do if I actually looked at it, but I was terrified. I had only seen dead bodies at funerals at that point, of like two great aunts, and those images still like haunted me. I didn't want to go anywhere near the shore, so I told her, I think I should just take you home. And then we all sort of pondered what to do about the body. And if I decided, it was the 2000s, so there were still payphones, and decided that I would call 911 from the payphone, and I gave a fake name, and told them, that I'd stumbled on body had washed ashore. And I remember that the operator asked me a lot of questions about who I was and why I was there and all the circumstances. And, she asked me if I had felt a pulse. And I was like, no, I did not. I'm sure she's dead, and the operator asked me how I was sure. And I described like what my sister had told me she'd seen, the sort of bloated body and the way the eyes looked, which she could barely identify as a body. And then, the operator told us to wait for help to come, but we just left South Beach. I dropped, my sister and her friends off at the house where they were supposed to stay, and just like snuck back in through the window to my house. And after that, we didn't really talk about it much, but I remember that we stopped sneaking out as much. We stopped going to clubs as much. And I remember that for weeks afterwards, like I would comb newspapers. I would watch evening news with my mom. The internet was sort of in its beginning stages, but I like searched for stories about this body that had washed ashore, and like nothing ever came up, and it was like years later that I would learn that this was actually not an uncommon occurrence in Miami. Unfortunately, bodies washed ashore somewhat often bodies of migrants or like drowning victims. But yeah, I never knew her name. I never knew her story. And I think it's one of the first times that I realized that, women can disappear, their lives, their stories, their names, take for granted. And I think that's part of why I write, and why I write specifically about women and their stories.